video for you. I will be going through 3 real-life stories, and in the background to take away from some of the grimness and to help us further relax or fall asleep, I'm doing all sorts of ASMR stuff in the background as always. So now I suggest that you lay back, relax, and listen. The first case that I want to tell you about is that of the murder of a girl named Taylor Cheyenne Rattery, Taylorshyann Ratteee. In the small Tennessee city of Dixon, an ordinary Tuesday night ended with a quiet street becoming the final scene of a young life cut short. 17-year-old Taylor Cheyenne Rattery, a high school senior with a future ahead of her, was shot and killed by someone she used to call her boyfriend, an 18-year-old named Hunter Jackson. What follows is not just a recounting of events, but an attempt to trace how a moment of panic and desperation became a fatal one. Taylor wasn't defined by this final moment nor by how she died. She was defined by how she lived in the small snippets captured by friends and family. She loved music, art, and crocheting. Tiny handmade things she sold and gave away, each stitch a testament to her creativity. She worked part-time at Kroger, balancing school and work like so many teens these days. She was planning, always planning, for college next year, and she was very hopeful and excited for what might come next. Her co-worker, Hayla Skelton, Hayla, remembered her as someone who radiated joy. She called her very happy all the time, and someone you'd never expect to vanish into silence. That conversation at work that evening was the last they ever had. She didn't walk the earth with deep secrets or grudges, her friends and family say. She walked it with her dreams. It was about 8 p.m. on December 16th of this year, 2025, when Hunter Jackson pulled up to where Taylor was leaving her shift. She got into his car, something that at least to Taylor might have seemed ordinary at the moment. Friends and co-workers didn't expect danger in that moment either. But as the car rolled toward Hensley Drive and stopped at a traffic light, something snapped. Taylor tried to get out. She attempted to jump out of the car. The reasons why, whether panic, fear, or instinct, aren't fully known yet. What is known is that Jackson shot her. Or allegedly, but Jackson shot her. There is a haunting emptiness in the simplicity of the fact. A red light, a teenager trying to get out of her ex-boyfriend's car, and then the sound of a gun, and a life ending. Authorities have released little about what happened in the minutes before the shooting, as the case is very ongoing. Police say Taylor tried to jump from the car as it sat at the light. A desperate move in a desperate moment. We don't have surveillance video. We don't have eyewitness accounts from inside the car. All that remains right now are these fragments. Taylor leaving work like any other shift. Jackson driving. A traffic stoplight. A shot fired. A life extinguished. Even in this limited outline, what's chilling isn't just the action. It's the suddenness of it. No long chase, no dramatic exchange, just a young woman trying to leave, and a weapon that answered her. Police found Taylor at the scene and rushed her to Skyline Medical Center. Despite efforts, she couldn't be saved. Hours later, she was pronounced dead from her wounds. Hunter Jackson was arrested on the spot. He is now charged with first-degree murder and he is held in jail with a $3 million bond. Investigators haven't publicly disclosed a motive, nor have they revealed any statements from Jackson about what happened. That lack, the silence on motive, is often where the story becomes both cold and haunting. Not that there is any need for motive for the prosecutors to convict, but it is the most important questions in our mind, trying to understand why makes someone snap like this. That is what remains the question in our heads at all times. Friends, family, and the Dixon community in Tennessee are left with memories. Photos shared by loved ones show a girl laughing, painting, and working on small crochet creations that are shaped like bumblebees. They show someone with plans, someone grounded in simple joys. The family has a GoFundMe to cover her funeral and memorial costs, and those are ordinary words, but here they carry a deep, aching weight. Dixon is not a city known for frequent homicides. For the past 3 years before this, it averaged about 1 per year. In a place where violent crimes are rare, this death hit them very hard. People who cross paths with someone on a daily basis, their co-workers, neighbors, classmates, they are all now trying to understand what it was like to live a normal life before this violent attack. Right now, we only can wait for more information. Let's get into our next case of the night. Now we are moving from Tennessee and going to Utah. This is the Utah cabin attack that left 2 sisters alive, but changed everything for their family. There is a certain kind of quiet that belongs to snowy forests. The hush that settles between trees under heavy frost, where sound feels trapped and distant. For the TD family, Tiede, that quiet was part of why they loved the mountains near Oakley, Utah. The remote cabin, a Christmas trip, a place that felt like a pause from the world. On December 22nd, 1990, that silence was broken, probably forever. What began as a holiday retreat soon became one of the most chilling home invasions in Utah's history. One that ended with 2 family members dead, 2 more taken, and truths about human violence unfolding horrifyingly. The TD family wasn't purposefully dramatic. They were a small, typical American family who found solace in ritual and togetherness. Rolf and Kay TD, a married couple, traveled each year to their cabin with the loved ones. On this winter day, they were with Kay's mother, 76-year-old Beth Potts, and her 2 daughters, 20-year-old Linnea, if I'm not mistaken, and 16-year-old Trisha, spelled Tricia, and Linae, both vibrant and full of life. They weren't just passing through the mountains. They had a life there. Decorations, gifts, a sense of routine. Christmas was approaching and the woods around them were supposed to be peaceful, untouched and comforting. But peace has a way of feeling fragile. The violence didn't start with the family's arrival. It began long before. custody earlier that same day. They carried guns and an urgency that wasn't just about survival. It was basically predatory. One of the guys, Von Taylor, even called a friend, saying that I'm going to shoot some people. What? How crazy. They didn't break in to hide. They broke in with intention of pure violence. The TD family had been out. When they returned, Kay, Beth, Lenny, they arrived first. To the grandmother, mother, and one of the sisters. Something in the quiet of that snowy afternoon changed in a heartbeat. The men were already inside. Linnea walked in and was met with guns, one of the young daughters. Her scream of robbers sliced through snow-thick air. But no warning is ever enough for a situation like this. In just a few minutes, Kay Didi, the mother of the house, 49 years old, shot dead. Her mother, grandmother, Beth Potts, 76, also shot dead. The husband and father, Rolf Didi, was shot in the face, left for dead after being doused with gasoline. The sisters Linnea and Trisha, or I think it is Trisha, were forced from the cabin at gunpoint, forced out of the cabin with at gunpoint, excuse me. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was brutality. A split-second transformation from holiday to nightmare. After the murders, the guys, Taylor and Tilly, they didn't stay, they fled with the two surviving daughters. But this was not a calm getaway. They made Linnea and Trisha load the family's snowmobiles and drive. Each sister taking one snowmobile and a gunman running behind each at gunpoint. Their footsteps in the snow were no longer quiet, they were frantic and controlled by the violence pushed on them by these two psychos. Imagine the sisters on those machines, the cold seeping through layers of their winter gear, the terror that they had just faced, watching their families get shot. The world around them might have seemed serene and beautiful, but everything inside, I can't even imagine. Somewhere along the road, a relative, their uncle, passed by and saw them. They didn't wave back. They didn't want anyone else in danger. How horrifying. That is an instinct born out of fear, a sheer fight for survival. not even a call for help. While his daughters were taken, Rolf Didi didn't die, even though he was shot in the head. With blood on face and full of shock and pain, he pretended to be dead. Moments later, he escaped the burning house, soaked in gasoline, shot in the face, and somehow found strength to force his way into the cold outside. Then he rode a snowmobile down the snowy hill. How many snowmobiles did they have? Injured, drenched, looking for help. In the cold, at the edge of survival, his body was breaking down, but his will didn't. Actually, this man, Rolf, later rebuilt that very cabin. Not out of denial, but perhaps out of a raw claim to what they once had. The same walls that held Apuleius that took away his wife and mother-in-law. They were rebuilt and would have memories that were much better than the one that they last had there. I think that's very admirable. Police got Taylor and Delhi not long after. A high-speed chase, ending the immediate terror, but not any of the trauma these girls lived through. In court, they stood side by side for charges: aggravated murder, kidnapping, and more, much more. Taylor pleaded guilty and received a death sentence. Delhi was convicted and given life in prison. Decades later, how many times do you see people actually get the death sentence? Decades later, Taylor's sentence was briefly overturned and then reinstated. Linnea and Trisha survived with memories most of us can't even imagine. Thank God. The sounds before gunfire, the faces of lost ones, the last moments, the desperate ride into cold wilderness with this man. So it seems that Taylor, one of the murderers, got the death penalty and he's been on death row for over 30 years. He's still alive and in Utah's correctional facility awaiting execution if it will ever come. The other guy is still in prison and he will remain there for the rest of his life. Alright, now it is time for the last case for the night, which was suggested to me by one of my subscribers, EMS7699. I don't know if you are here. Let me know if you are also here watching this. So this one is truly heartbreaking, and it includes harm being done to a child. So if you don't want to hear about that, maybe you should skip the rest of the video. On 12th of February 1993, in a busy shopping center in Bootle, Liverpool, Bootle, Bootle, a 2-year-old named James Patrick Bulger, Bulger, slipped out of the safe orbit of his mother's hand and was actually led away into something dark. He was not missing for long, but what was done to him in those hours would become one of the most disturbing child-on-child murders in modern history. Not because of some monster in disguise, but because the perpetrator is literally a child themselves. James was with his mother, Denise Bulger, at the New Strand shopping center, another remote place, not late at night, just an ordinary public space. In a brief moment, when his mother looked away to pay for some items they bought, he was gone from her sight. CCTV later showed 2 older boys, hand in hand with James, leading him out of the center. Those frames, grainy, silent and chilling, became the evidence that anchored this case. They weren't adults. No stranger in dark coat, definitely not hidden. They were 2 10-year-old boys named Robert Thompson and John Venables, G-O-N. They were children by age, but what they did is simply unimaginable to any child or adult. James didn't disappear into a house or an alley. He was taken on a 2.5-mile walk through Liverpool. Imagine this is a 2-year-old. Along the route, witnesses saw the trio, and in some moments, people stopped them. A shopkeeper asked if James was their brother. They of course said yes. Another passerby thought they might be taking him to a police station. But those interactions didn't stop the journey. For about 38 people who saw them, those moments passed. No one stopped them. And this happened. At one point, the boys stopped near Leeds and Liverpool Canal, where James' distress was visible. How heartbreaking. He was obviously crying. And then the path led toward the Walton and Anfield railway line, a quiet, isolated taking in details. James was injured repeatedly, dropped on his head, bruised and beaten. Even paint was thrown into his eyes. Bricks and stones were used against him. A heavy piece of railway iron was brought down on his skull. By the time forensic experts examined him, they counted 42 separate injuries, including multiple skull fractures. There were attempts, however horrific to describe, to stage his death as an accident. What in the world? James' body was placed across the tracks and weighted down with rubble so that when a train passed through the spot, it would sever his body and make it seem like, a tragic accident. But again, these are idiot 10-year-olds. How is that gonna work? Where did the child came from? Didn't they know that there are CCTV cameras all over the city and the mall? Maybe they didn't, because they're 10. The train did come though, but James' body was very much dead before it arrived. 2 days later, a group of children found his body on the tracks. A sight no children should ever see, let alone relive through. The gravity here is obviously hard to put into words. Especially the killers were not adults, they were 10-year-old boys themselves. Old enough to walk alone, old enough to understand basic right from wrong because they took him away. But still young enough that the world still sees them as children. They weren't caught because they fled. They were picked up by the CCTV images. A neighbor recognized one of them. Not because he looked dangerous, but because it was familiar. And the police was led directly to them. What followed was one of the most controversial trials in British legal history. A trial of children as adult offenders, held in adult court with the nation watching. And before I get to that part, I'm going to say they should have definitely been tried as adults. This is not a normal case. This is not something normal that a 10-year-old does. These are dangerous humans. And that's all I have to say. They were convicted of abduction and murder at age 11. Mandatory sentencing for juvenile at this level in the UK meant they were ordered to be detained during Her Majesty's pleasure. What? And in Majesty possibly pardon a criminal. I've never thought about that, but I bet they never do, but technically they could. Anyway, in 2001, both boys were released on license after about 8 years, given new identities and protected by anonymity orders, meant to prevent retaliation or public target. What in the world? I didn't expect it to go there. But the story didn't stop there. Interestingly enough, as I said, no normal human being is capable of such a crime, so it is understandable that after they were let back into the world after mutilating and brutally killing a 2-year-old, something that even evil adults are sometimes, they are incapable of. So it's understandable that they were. One of the boys, John Venables, was later recalled to prison twice, once in 2010 and again in 2017. Now guess what they had? Guess what he had in his possession? Yes, child SA material. Isn't that crazy? So are you telling me these horrifyingly troubled children are said to be evil monsters from a young age, and if there's nothing done about it, they are going to become grown adults? Like he's 10, but in 8 years he's going to be an 18-year-old who is going to do the same thing to a 2-year-old that he has already done. This is just crazy to me. His most recent parole attempts, this John Venables guy, he's been repeatedly denied, and as of late 2025 he is in custody. James' parents, Denise and Ralph Bulger, have carried this grief for more than 3 decades. Denise has spoken publicly about her remorse over that moment that she let go of his hand at the shopping center. Oh my god, I can't even. She's gonna think about that for her whole life. Alright. That is mostly it for this case as well. That was truly horrifying. But I hope that is far into the video. You're already asleep and probably didn't hear that last case. If you're asleep, I hope that you're lucid and in charge, and everything that you see is of happiness, peacefulness, and restfulness, and nothing of all this darkness that exists all around the world. Thank you so much for your support and for listening to me, and I'll see you guys soon.